Locked Onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Brice Paterik of the Dallas Morning News, and here we are in the offseason, the first official day of no baseball. The Rays were eliminated last night in Globe Life Field from the World Series. Dodgers won it in 6 games, and we are officially in the offseason. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get 20% off your next order. So, yeah, it was kind of a disaster last night in Game 6 of the World Series. I talked a little bit about it at the last episode with a roundtable with a few other Locked On MLB hosts, but not to mention the Blake Snell decision, the COVID outbreak with Justin Turner, and all of the ruckus surrounding that. If you want to hear about that, we go very hard into Rob Manfred and his decision-making in that episode, so be sure to go check that out. But first, I want to give a shout-out to Clayton Kershaw. He has been in the World Series 3 times, and he finally got his ring, and he got to do it in his home, close to his home in Arlington. The Dodgers have been one of the best teams every single year since 2013 is the last time. Is the first time they started this streak of making the playoffs. They've made the playoffs every year since, and they made 3 of the last 4 World Series. He's been the best pitcher of this generation. He's been incredibly consistent basically since his sophomore season in 2009, which is so incredibly difficult to do. And shout out to the Dodgers as well for being able to come back from probably the worst World Series loss, most embarrassing, most humbling and iconic and terrible loss in Game 4 to the Rays, and they did not lose a single game after that. I don't know how they did it, but congratulations to them. It was a great World Series. The Rays should hang their hats high. And Randy Arozarena, it might be just look like one of the best players in baseball, if not the best player in baseball for the entire postseason. Who knows if he actually will do that again next year? Who knows anything about next year? But we're all done with this past year. So we're going to start by recapping this offseason. We're going to start it off by recapping what the heck was up with the Rangers offense. It was quite bad. Spoiler alert. According to Fangraphs, as an offensive WAR as a team, they were absolutely dead last with a negative 2.4 WAR for position players. Basically, any metric you want to use to justify this Rangers offense, like it was all bad. You look at strikeout percentage; they struck out 25.5% of this time, which was 25th in baseball. They had a walk rate of 7.8%, 27th in baseball. They only hit 62 homers, which was 24th in baseball. 219 batting average, 29th. 285 on base, 29th. Slugging percentage of 364, 29th. All bad. All very, very bad, which is just such a foreign concept to the Rangers. This is a team that has been known for its entire history of being a great offensive team. They had those great offensive teams in the 90s, led by so many different home run hitters, and it's just been an absolute masher of an offense for the last few years, or at least basically since 2010, back when those Rangers teams were actually making the postseason. They had very, very deep lineups. But this year, not so much at all. Everyone was bad, and if you weren't bad, then you were hurt. And if you weren't hurt, then you were a youngin', and you were only here for just a little bit. So who are the main culprits behind this Rangers offense being so bad? I want to start with the Rangers front office. After missing out on Anthony Rendon, the plan B wasn't really there to go get some offensive help, and they knew they needed help. There was at least a few bats short going into this season, but I understand not wanting to give Josh Donaldson a 4-year, $92 million deal. That's fine, but there were other guys who were there. Marcell Ozuna only signed a 1-year deal, and he was incredible for Atlanta. We saw it in the postseason. We saw it in the regular season. He was just an offensive force, and the Rangers could have used an offensive force, whether he was just their DH or spent some time in the outfield. Apparently, they had some time left in the outfield with all of the injuries that happened to their outfielders. Also, Yasiel Puig was there. He was available. The Rangers decided not to go get him. So I don't know what they were doing. I understand not wanting to spend. Puig was a little bit of a question mark. Ozuna was definitely a guy, if you were willing to take a 1-year bet on him, then you could probably sign him for a big contract if it worked out well in the next offseason and have a long-term offensive piece. The Rangers decided not to do that, and Ozuna went to Atlanta, and it worked out for them and not for the Rangers. Also, Nick Castellanos was there. He ended up costing quite a bit, but he was still there for the taking. Like, he could have played some left field. I know his defense is trash, but you had basically an open DH spot after this season, with Shin-Soo Choo's contract expiring. And also, they could have been much more aggressive with Yasmani Grandal. He was one of the first ones to sign. He did sign a big, I believe, 4-year deal with Chicago. He was one of the first free agents to sign. But the Rangers knew he was there. He was good. He's been good. He's been consistent. He was a huge upgrade at catcher, which the Rangers desperately, desperately needed after having so much time spent at the catcher position by Jeff Mathis. But there's also a lot of injuries that were to blame. I don't know what the Rangers were thinking, trying to bet that Danny Santana, who had one really, really good year, was going to be an offensive, like, their 3-hole hitter for almost the whole year. Also, they lost Hunter Pence for nothing, and they hoped that Willie would have his mid-800s OPS like he did in 2019. Injuries kind of robbed him of that. Shin-Soo Choo also had an OPS over 800 last year. He was still pretty good last year, but injuries and aging kind of robbed him of having the season he would have liked to this year. Also, we missed almost the entire season of Danny Santana and Willie Calhoun. So that is two major offensive pieces down the drain without much to show for it for the Rangers. So then you have guys like Odor and Andrews. They also struggled very mightily this year, and it just was not to be for them. They were bottom of the order hitters. Odor spent a lot of time on the IL with an eye infection. He had like 1 or 2 weeks where he just couldn't stop hitting homers. But other than that, that's kind of the story of Rougned Odor. That's what he's been. That's what he will continue to be, I think, moving forward. And I don't know if the Rangers will give him that, if he'll be even able to win the starting second base job next year heading into the season. It's just very, very confusing for him. And Odor, or Andrews had a lot of injuries, back injuries, and he just did not look himself all this year. Also, they were counting on a little bit more from Nick Solak. He had a pretty good year offensively last year, hitting over 300, and the OPS was over 800. But this year, they just the long ball was not falling for him. He had 5 home runs last year. He had 5 home runs this year, and many more plate appearances. Just the power was not there from Nick Solak, and I think the Rangers were really banking on that. And so when the market dried up, all the Rangers had left was to go get Robinson Chirinos, which I liked at the time, but injuries also robbed him of most of his season. And Todd Frazier, I didn't feel great about that deal going forward. I didn't think he would even be a regular. Turns out he was a regular because the Rangers were so snake-bitten by injuries and by bad offense, and his OPS was kind of trash, just a little bit over 700, I believe 702. And we had 2 home runs in 31 games. It was just, that was it. That was their 2 big offseason splashes. And as of today, the Mets declined their contract option for next year on both of those guys because that's where they ended up going. Lastly, Joey Gallo was a big disappointment this year. It hurts to say. It sucks to see. He had his first All-Star season last year and his best offensive season by far. Granted, it was only in 70 games, but he looked fantastic. He hit 253. He'd never done that before. He had an on-base of 389, an OPS of 986. He was playing incredible defense as a center fielder. He had 22 home runs in those 70 games. He was just on fire. He's one of the better players in baseball for the first half. Then he had a few injuries that robbed him of the second half of the season. Didn't play much, and when he did play, he wasn't looking himself. But this year, he played in 57 games, didn't really have injury problems, just was benched for a few games because he just did not look like himself. He hit 181 with an on-base of 301, an OPS of 679. That is not what you want from your best hitter. The walk rate was similar to what it was last year. Strikeout rate was a little bit similar, but the power numbers just weren't there. Only 10 home runs in 57 games and 8 doubles. That's just not what you're looking for from Joey Gallo. He put the entire weight of the world and the Rangers' offensive struggles on himself, and it showed. He was not – no one man except for Randy Arozarena in the playoffs is able to carry an entire offense by himself. But, Arozarena only did it in the playoffs, not for a 60-game regular season. And Joey Gallo was trying to do that for the entire season, and it just didn't work out. So this was just a top-to-bottom disaster for the Rangers offense this year. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to look at a few bright spots before we head up right after this word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. You guys know Built Bar. They've got 18 amazing flavors, and 6 of those are new flavors because Built Bar is even delicious-er. They've got caramel brownie, cookies and cream, cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, carrot cake, even apple almond crisp. The bars, they're soft and easy to chew. They're also covered in 100% chocolate. Who doesn't love chocolate? Built Bar is great for the health-conscious guy or gal. You can lose or maintain weight while indulging in an absolutely delicious treat. Bars are low calorie, they're low sugar, they're also high in protein and high in fiber, which means they're great for the keto diet. Go to Built Bar right now. Go to BuiltBar.com right now and use promo code LOCKEDON, all one word, and you'll get 20% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off at BuiltBar.com. Now, I don't want you to think that it was all bad news bears for the Rangers offense this season. I mean, it was, but like there are some good things that came out of this Rangers offense this year. It was mainly the youth, but I want to start with someone who is not a youth. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa showed his spring training power surge was legit, and he showed up with his best OPS ever. Granted, it was still below 700, but he was a guy you never thought would hit almost any major league home runs. He's definitely got a lot of work to be done offensively. I want him to add a lot more power and like show a little bit more pop than he did this year. But it was a huge increase over what he did last year. Considering where he was last year as kind of a backup catcher slash super utility slash backup center field slash shortstop slash whatever the heck you want him to be, he actually was given a position this year and he looked like he knew exactly what to do with it. I mean, I knew there would be some drop off defensively between whoever the next person to take over consistently after Adrian Beltre was. And we kind of saw that with a little bit of Asdrubal Cabrera last year. We saw it a lot with Todd Frazier this year. But then IKF stepped in. You're like, oh my gosh, it looks like Brian Beltre there. He was phenomenal defensively, and he earned his spot as an everyday regular. Granted, I would like to see him add more power, bulk up a little bit more this offseason, just like he did last year. But I mean, improvement is not a straight line usually. It's very jagged and curvy line. But IKF showed that he isn't a regular, and his offense was one of the better hitters for the Rangers this season. I know batting average doesn't always mean a lot, but he did hit 280, which was very good for the Rangers. And his on base was 329. I would like to see him walk a little bit more. He only walked 14 times in 228 plate appearances. He never strikes out very much. He only had 32 strikeouts in that same rate. So if he could just walk a little bit more, add a little bit more thump in his bat, I think it'd be a very, very good MLB regular as opposed to just a pretty good MLB regular. Some of the other offensive bright spots were guys like Jose Trevino, who really took advantage of an opening in the catcher spot with so many injuries to Robinson Chirinos. He really showed that his bat was a plus. Well, I don't want to say plus, but it was at least MLB average, which when you're a backup catcher or maybe a starting catcher next year, that's all you really need. He only had 83 plate appearances this year, but he had an OPS of 715, which was very solid for him. A pair of home runs and 8 doubles. There was a period in time, I think it was around when the Rangers were playing San Diego, they just could not stop doubling. And that's really what you're looking for from him. I mean, you already knew that he had the defense, he had the arm. Pitchers feel very, very comfortable pitching to him, which is what you really, really want from your backup catcher. And if he can provide a little bit of thump, just a little bit, not a whole bunch, doesn't have to hit 15 home runs. That's fine. Just your 2 in 83 plate appearances, that's fine. More than fine in 24 games. But he really took a step forward, and I loved seeing that from him. Lastly, the youngins, the absolute youngins. Because Jose Trevino is no longer a youngin. He's 27 this year. But Leody Taveras, Sam Huff, and Anderson Tejeda jumped way higher than anyone thought they could, and they didn't flinch. That was the biggest thing from them this year. Seeing Leody Taveras have an OPS over 700 was huge. I never thought he'd do that. I didn't think he'd be playing in the big leagues barely at all this season, let alone being basically given the center field starting job for the second half of the year. I mean, 33 games, 134 plate appearances. Granted, he only hit 227, but he had an on base of 308. That's 14 walks in 134 plate appearances, which is a walk rate over 10%, which you absolutely love to see. A slugging percentage near 400, which, given his history with not being able to hit the ball over the fence, was really solid for him. 4 home runs in that period, a triple, and 6 doubles. That's more extra base hits than I ever thought that he would get. And Anderson Tejeda, I mean, I just cannot say enough about how good a short season that this guy had. I mean, the 3 home runs, a triple, 4 doubles, an OPS of 726 as a 22-year-old who just really was not ready for this level, at least I thought. But he proved, yeah, I don't care. I'm not intimidated. You can't intimidate me by jumping me up a whole crap ton of levels without playing much of a regular preseason, the summer games, whatever the heck that was, summer training, summer camp, whatever we actually called it. He really showed that he would not be afraid at all. Sam Huff, despite a very, very slow start, did play in 10 games and hit 3 home runs in that span and 3 doubles as well. Had an OPS of 1136. Granted, a very small sample size of 33 plate appearances. Doesn't matter. Really loved what I saw from him. And granted, the strikeouts were definitely a problem. 11 strikeouts in those 33 plate appearances, which is exactly 1/3 of the time. Definitely don't think we'll see him up much. Definitely not at the beginning of the year next year. But depending on where the pandemic is, if there's a minor league season, whatever, I expect to see him quite a bit at Frisco. I think the same of Anderson Tejeda. I think Leody Taveras is ready to be a major league regular for the Rangers. I mean, he proved his worth defensively. I mean, he was one of the, if not the best defensive center fielder in baseball for the second half of the season. He was just phenomenal, robbing homers, taking great routes, had a great arm as well. I love what I saw from him as well. Lastly, Derek Dietrich showed up late, came in with a vengeance, and could not stop hitting dingers. 5 home runs, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in 25 games, that's a pretty solid pop. Had an on-base of 347, slugged 459, OPS of 806, which was really solid, one of the best on the Rangers. Granted, even in a smaller sample size, it was second best behind Sam Huff, who had a ridiculous OPS in just 10 games. But doesn't matter. I think he might be the Rangers starting second baseman next year. I'm not really sure where all that's going to go. I know the Rangers offense will probably be at least a little bit better next year, but we will see where all that is with the injuries and with some offseason moves. I don't expect too much change up, and you probably shouldn't either, but who knows where we'll be. But we're here in the Rangers offseason, and now we're here in the off season, and we will make the best of it. And I will be with you every week moving forward, 3 days a week going forward. But yeah, until next time, don't forget to take care of yourselves and enjoy baseball.